If you're grinding through 50 plus dials a day and still not booking meetings, it's not because you're bad at cold calling, it's because your inputs are broken. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to consistently book 3 to 5 meetings per day using nothing but cold calls. First, by identifying the inputs that actually matter most. To become successful at anything beyond just cold calling, you have to identify the inputs so that you can reverse engineer the outputs. So that's what we're going to do. What inputs actually matter to cold calling, reverse engineer what success looks like, in this case 3 to 5 meetings per day, then break down the formula for how to actually do that so it's not overwhelming. It's very doable when you break it down. Then we're going to look into how to improve and refine each key input, tackling them one at a time, and then how to optimize your cold call system going forward to accelerate your results. So let's get into it. So what are the cold call inputs that matter most? Just first principles, break it down. When you pick up the phone, there's 3 primary ways to increase the number of meetings that you book over the phone on a consistent basis. And it might seem obvious, but you have to break it down for it to actually be obvious. So 1, increase the number of calls you make. All else equal, if you don't get any better at cold calling, but you make more calls, on average, you can expect to book more meetings. 2, increase the number of prospects that answer the phone. So not increasing the number of calls you make, but just getting more people to answer the phone, on average, you'll book more meetings. And the 3, an obvious one, increase the percentage of meetings you book when a prospect answers the phone. So to make this more simple, in other words, the 3 cold call inputs that matter most are your call volume, your answer rate, and your set rate. You have to take the time to actually break it down like this, because then you can tackle each of these key inputs one by one and not just look at your results as, did I book a meeting today or did I not? Because if you understand these 3 inputs, you can reverse engineer what 3 to 5 meetings per day looks like. So that's what we're going to do here. So we got a lot of different scenarios up here. We're going to do a little math. I'm sorry if you hate math. You don't actually have to do algebra to figure this out, but I just want to show you how you can actually understand these inputs. So in the first row, we're going to break down what it looks like to book 1 meeting per day, 3 meetings per day, and 5 meetings per day with some consistent inputs. You have a 10% answer rate, 1 out of 10 prospects that you call answer the phone. You have a 1 out of 10 set rate, and we're going to figure out how many calls you need to make to book 1, 3, and 5 meetings per day. It's the same formula every time. Let's look at 1 meeting per day. If your answer rate is 10%, your set rate is 10%, then you need to make 100 calls in order to book 1 meeting per day. It's pretty good for a lot of you. If you're booking 1 meeting a day, that's a very good start. But what if we want to book 3 meetings per day with those same inputs? Well, that's going to take 300 calls, which might start to get a little disheartening. Now, this is even possible. I'm starting to open up to dialers. We'll talk about those in a second. With dialers, this is pretty doable, but I, to this day, I'm still a manual guy. I make calls one by one. Making 300 calls is really hard. So if you're looking to book 3 meetings per day with these inputs, it's going to be tough consistently. Now, what about 5? If you're seeing the pattern, that's going to take 500 dials. That's pretty disheartening. That's going to take a lot of effort and is not that achievable on a consistent basis. Now, on the bottom row, we're going to look at the same outputs, the 1 meeting per day, 3 meeting per day, 5 meeting per day, but look at the difference with just the tiniest improvements in some of these key inputs. So let's look at 1 meeting per day. Nothing changes. You don't get any better on the phone, but now, because you're a little more strategic, which we're going to talk about in a second how to do this, we get, instead of 10% of people answering the phone, we get 12%. That's a 20% improvement. Set rate's still 10. How many calls do you need to make now? 83. It's a pretty big difference with just a tiny little increase in answer rate and keeping all else equal. You drop from 100 on a consistent basis to 83 in order to book 1 more meeting or 1 meeting per day. Now let's look at 3 meetings per day. Let's say your answer rate, we bump this up to 15. So we're getting a little higher on the answer rate, and then set rate bumps up to 20. So instead of 1 out of 10 lives you book, 2 out of 10, which is a very doable improvement over time. We're going to break this down. So number of calls you need to make in this scenario, 100. So we dropped from 300 to 100 in order to book 3 meetings per day, 15% answer rate, 20% set rate. You should expect to need to make about 100 calls on average to book 3 meetings per day. Now, what about 5? Let's bump this answer rate up from 15% to 17%. These aren't drastic improvements. It's doable. And let's say we increase that set rate from 20% to 24. So essentially 1 out of 5 you book to 1 out of 4. Well, the number of calls, 122. It's a lot. It's going to be a grind of a day, but it's definitely within reason. If you book 5 meetings per day, I don't care what industry you are or what level you're in, that is a home run, grand slam, killer day. But instead of just looking at it as, did I book any meetings today or how many meetings did I book this week? You can start to break down these inputs and you start to realize how small improvements make massive increases in results, especially when you're able to increase two variables at once. If you're able to increase both your answer rate and your set rate, the number of meetings you can book per day starts to increase pretty exponentially. So the formula for booking 3 to 5 meetings per day, put in the simplest of terms, is make a lot of dials, call during times of day prospects are most likely to answer the phone. That's what you can control. And then convert as many of those live calls to meetings as you can. So what this could look like if you dedicate a day to cold calling, especially if you're an SDR. I know not every day can look like this. You have meetings that come up, especially if you're an AE and you're running sales cycles. But when you're an SDR, a lot of times you have days where you don't have many responsibilities other than prospecting. So if you really wanted to just maximize your productivity for the day, you want to call during times of days that prospects are more likely to answer. And what the data shows is that time of day is in between 8 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. in their time zone. And then also at the end of the day, about 4 p.m. to actually 6 p.m. their time zone. It's okay to call after 5. So if you theoretically wanted to maximize your productivity for the day, cold calling, just dedicating the day, I would 8:30 to 9:30 call contacts that are located in the East Coast. From 9:30, and this is assuming I live on the East Coast. This might change depending on what time zone you're in, but you can still plan your day around this. 9:30 to 11 a.m. I would call counts and prospects in Central Time, and then 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. you can call in Pacific Time. Then at the end of the day, look, you can still call throughout the middle of the day if you're still grinding. I personally I would go in a room, turn the lights off, just demon mode, and just rip dials until I had made at least 100. That's what I did pretty much every day as an SDR. But then at the end of the day, you can call 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. East Coast, 5:30 to 7 p.m. Central. And look, if you're ready to grind and you just want to work that day, you're not thinking in 9 to 5 terms, you can call Pacific Coast accounts at 7:30 p.m. and it's 4:30 p.m. for them, and nothing's wrong in their eyes. So what you need to do in order to actually execute on this, though, because it's easy to say call them by time zones, but how do you do that? How do you actually get these contacts and these lists ready? How do you just rip dials consistently without needing to think in between every cold call? You need to have your targeted list built in advance. So I call this process coiling the spring. I'll link to a video where I go much more in depth on this, but you want to have lists where they all share similar characteristics. You want to batch your personas, batch your buyers by job titles. So they all have the same job title, so you can pretty much say the same thing to any of them. Maybe they have the same job title and all work in the same industry. You want to do it by geography too, so you can do the time zones. Whatever your key buying triggers are, you want to have homogeneous lists that fit those characteristics. Then we're going to build cold call scripts and value statements in advance that are targeted for these lists. So if you're calling directors of finance that work in retail, you can pretty much say the same opening value statement to any director of finance in retail and not have to research their LinkedIn or research their company or their background. You can pretty much be confident that whatever you say is going to be relevant to a director of finance in retail or a VP of HR in banking, whatever it is. And then you need to have scheduled call blocks where you're prepared in advance. I'm going to talk about later in this video how long it actually takes to make about 100 dials a day. Because look, if you're aiming to book 3 to 5 meetings in a day over cold call, you're generally going to have to make over 100 dials in order to do that. So you want to know when you're cold calling and be prepared. And then lastly, you need to dial, kind of like what I was just talking about, without hesitation and skip the research between calls. There's a time and place to be more strategic when you know specific priorities. You've looked at the company's strategic plan, especially if it's a big enterprise account and you're being a little more strategic in your outreach. That's one bucket. But this bucket, you just need to be able to, oh, that director of finance didn't answer, next dial. They didn't answer, next dial. And you can't pause or hesitate in between dials. Just know that's the point you have to get to if this is the number you're aiming for. So now let's break down how to improve and refine each key input. Because I think a lot of you probably understand even coming into this video. Yeah, make more dials, get more people to answer, and then book more meetings when people answer. But you have to actually break down First, identify the bottlenecks. So what prevents you from making more dials? Not organizing, not coiling the spring, not waking up with a plan and figuring out, what do I need to do today? What contacts do I need to reach out to? I got to add them to a list. What am I going to say to them? And next thing you know, it's 10 a.m. and you've barely started your day yet. Too much pre-dial research, in researching their LinkedIn, feeling like you have to have the perfect thing to say or understand their whole company before reaching out. Not using a repeatable cold call structure, which just builds anxiety and makes it harder to make more calls. Calls can take too long too. You want to structure these calls to be more direct and go for the meeting. Voicemails, I put this in here too because a lot of people, I don't have a strong opinion on this, but in my opinion, I don't leave voicemails because in my experience, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. I don't get enough callbacks from voicemail to justify the amount of extra time it takes to leave them. Like, you're leaving 100 voicemails, that's a lot. And it just, when they do call back, it's hard to know who you called. So I just generally choose to scrap voicemails for broad, general, outbound cold calling, unless I have a very good reason to be leaving a voicemail. And overall, just creating too much daily friction for yourself in your process. So how to solve this? Coil the spring, like I was just talking about. Batch your persona so you know who you're calling, that you have 100 people or more on a list that all share the same job title, work in the same department, same industry, whatever it is, whatever combo, so you can say the same thing to all of them. The value statement framework itself, who you are, why you're calling, what you want, make your intent clear. It's actually designed to shorten the length of these cold calls and not turn them into 10-minute discovery calls, because that makes it harder to make more calls. Time block, like I was just saying. And then dialers. I, to this day, don't use dialers, but I'm really opening up to them. Parallel dialers and power dialers. I've heard better things about power dialers. I've heard parallel dialers, there's an awkward beep. And look, even if these things lower your set rate, call it from 20% to 15% because it's a little harder to manage, if it helps you make 4 times as many dials, then it's more than going to make up for the slight drop off in set rate. So that's the kind of math you got to do in your head if you decide you want to use one of these. But I'm starting to think they're kind of a no-brainer for efficiency if it's an option for you. Then let's look at answer rate. Things that prevent higher answer rates. Lack of consistency. So not actually, the more you follow up with, the more you call customers in a short, or prospects in a shortened time period, the more likely they are to answer. And the more consistent time of day you do it too. So calling at random times will lower your answer rate. Not taking time zones into account, like I was just talking about. And again, voicemails, this is one of my theories. I don't have data to support this, but voicemails are just generally hard to do well. You generally sound salesy. A lot of times, because you're making so many, I hear reps, and I make this mistake too, you tend to get lazy. It's like, hi, this is Connor Murray, calling from XYZ company, looking to set up some time, blah, blah, blah. And it just sounds lazy, and I think it inadvertently lowers your response rates to future calls that they would have picked up. So the solution, and put a consistent process in place. I talk about the A-B cadence. Again, I'll link to a video where I go more in depth on that. Strategic call blocks that take into account time zones. Call direct and mobile numbers if you can, either direct work numbers or mobile numbers. Yeah, you'll get some people who are mad some of the time, but the benefits far outweigh the cons. You don't want to be calling those company lines where you got to insert a 4-digit code or talk to a gatekeeper, if you want to call it that, in between, so they redirect you. It just slows you down. And then use local presence numbers if you can. There's tools to do this. They're actually baked into a lot of these dialer tools. I know Apollo has one. I've heard of Phone Burner. There's a few out there you can check out. But all of these things can, especially the time zones, that can increase your answer rate by 5% or 10%. Yeah, is every person going to start answering because you call them first thing in the morning? No, but will it increase by 5%? Sure. 10%? Sure. And from what you saw on the last slide, that can make a massive difference. And then set rate, this is kind of a loaded one because it's essentially how good you are at booking meetings, how good you are at cold calling. But if I had to break it down, the biggest thing preventing people from higher set rates is poor tonality and pacing. You have to have your value statements or your scripts down. You have to sound confident, no ahs and ums. You can't use passive language. So if interested, I'd love to set up some time next week if you're free. You put these little caveats on there because you're not actually confident, and it just makes the path of least resistance for the prospect to just push you away, say, send me an email, or I'll circulate, talk about it with my team and reach back out. Lack of structure or direction on the cold calls. That's why I like the value statements that are designed to be direct and make your intent clear that what you're looking to do here is book a meeting. give you a shot on net or a percent chance of booking the meeting. And then asking too many questions, doing too much discovery on cold calls, and forgetting that this isn't always the time and place. If their tone is receptive and they're engaging back with you, sure, but a lot of times from what you all probably know and experience, you're getting that defensive tone. Maybe they're interested in what you're saying, but they're not interested in having a 10, 15-minute discovery call right now and answering 5 questions. That will lower your set rate over the long term. So the solution, a confident downward inflecting tone. So not an upward inflecting tone. If you're interested, I'd love to set up some time more. Yeah, I'm looking to set up some time this week just to get introduced and aligned on this going forward. How's your calendar look on Wednesday or Thursday? Small changes like that make a huge difference in set rate. And the downward inflecting tone is typically accompanied by assumptive language. The two go hand in hand. Using a repeatable structure so that you know what you're doing when the prospect says hello. You're going to tell them who you are, why you're calling, what you want. Same way every time. It flows off the tongue. It's really going to improve your set rate and make you feel more confident on every single cold call and make you more excited to call, which helps with call volume too. And then being direct and going for the meeting, giving yourself a shot on net. The purpose of the cold call is to book a meeting with a high value persona that's likely to lead to an opportunity, not to run a 10-minute discovery call. I want to be doing that on the meeting, not on a cold call, because it's not the time and place in a lot of cases. So when it comes to optimizing, the big 3, as we've discussed, your call volume, your answer rate, and your set rate. How long should it take to make 100 plus dials? Generally, if you're wanting to book 3 to 5 meetings in a day, it's going to take more than 100 dials, probably closer to even 150, 200 in a lot of cases. A simple Excel document is all you need. That's why I put one in Cold Call Mastery, and you don't need to create some super complex spreadsheet. Really, you just need to track in column A, how many calls did I make that day? Track how many answers you got, track how many meetings you booked, and you can do a sum all at the end. It will automatically calculate it for you. But it makes cold calling more fun. It gives you the why behind your results so that if you don't book any meetings that day or you don't book the desired amount in a week, it's not like, I only booked 1 meeting this week. You can see, oh, my answer rate was super low, or I just didn't make enough dials this week, or my set rate was low. And here's the thing, even bad weeks, you can actually realize they were pretty good. Like if you increase your answer rate, maybe you didn't get the meetings booked, but you just saw, oh, my answer rate increased by 10%. You know you're setting yourself up to do very well in the future if you can just get that set rate higher. So for reference though, the average cold call, and this includes calls that go straight to voicemail or where there's no answer, where it's like 10 seconds, so it brings down the average, generally ends up taking about 1 to 3 minutes, 60 seconds to 180 seconds on average. So if you just do the math, a 1-minute average on the lower end is about 100 minutes. That's a little under 2 hours. Now that's not really that good. That probably means no one answered the phone, but you can make 100 calls in a little under 2 hours if you're just really dialed in and focused. On the other side, the higher end 3-minute average, that's 300 minutes, which is about 5 hours, which is a lot. But if you're an SDR and you're dedicating the day to cold calling and you don't have responsibilities or many of them on your calendar, it's doable. And generally it ends up in that 3 to 4 hour range, which is definitely doable if you're structuring your day the right way. So cut down on distractions. Like I said, I like to go in a room, turn the lights off, demon mode, have your calendar invites ready. So if you're calling a particular persona, have a calendar invite targeted for that persona that's copy and pastable, ready to go. So you can just send that out, because that's a killer is when you do book a meeting, you take a 10-minute victory lap, you tell your peers, you got to type up the agenda, and it kills like 30 minutes of time and then makes it harder to get back into that groove. One last thing I'll say about distractions too is this is why I like to make dials personally in just a room by myself. I used to be a manager. I get the value of doing it on the floor with other peers. There's a time and place to do that, but it just creates distractions. People want, how'd that call go? What'd they say? Whether it was good or bad. Sometimes people are laughing, poking fun at each other in a lighthearted way, but like they're laughing about some blowout call, and it's distracting. So I like to get my dials in, and then with any extra leftover time, I'll go do it on the floor with people if that's what management expects of you. And then tackle one input at a time. So you don't need to try to fix everything at once. You don't need to do volume, answer rate, and set rate at once, because as we saw, small improvements lead to massive increases in results. So look at micro goals. My goal is just forget set rate. I'm going to try and make the same amount of dials every day, but I just want to increase my answer rate by 5%. And I'm not talking about like increase from 10% to 15%. That's increase from 10% to 10.5%. That makes a huge difference over the long run, and it gamifies the process. It makes the weeks where you're not getting the results you want a little more bearable because you can actually see under the hood what's going on and where you need to improve. So if you want more guidance actually creating one of these sheets for yourself and live coaching, breaking down your inputs, coiling the spring, value statements, all that good stuff, you can join the Cold Call Mastery community. I run the live calls in there every single week, so I hope to see you in there. And if you got value, subscribe, join the newsletter for weekly actionable sales tips that you can implement immediately. Hit the like button, and I'll see you on the next one.